webinar for today, Transforming Test Automation, Scriptless Testing Comes of Age. Next slide, please. All right, today's webinar is brought to you by Turnkey. I am your host for today. My name is Bernard Shimshak. I'm the Vivit leader for the Testing Quality and Application Lifecycle Management Special Interest Group, as well as for the Ohio chapter. And who we have presenting today for our speaker, we have Daniel Gannon. He's president and CEO of Turnkey Solutions. He's been in this industry for quite a while, and you're going to get to see and hear a lot from this man today about Turnkey and what they have to offer. All right, next slide. Just some basic housekeeping on this. This is a live session, and it's being recorded. So the recordings are going to be available to all the Vivit members, those who are on here and those who are not. And our session Q&A that we're going to be having, just go ahead and type your questions into the questions pane. We're going to go ahead and organize those as quickly as possible. And at the end of the presentation, we're going to go ahead and ask those of the presenters for here. All right, next. All right, so your webinar control panel, you'll see that in the upper right of your screen. So you can toggle view the screen between windows or full screen mode. And you also have your questions pane. Just click the little plus sign there and you'll get it to drop down for you to be able to type in. All right, next slide. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over here. All right, Dan, if you want to go ahead and take it away from here.
Bernard, thank you very much. Welcome, everyone. I appreciate your attendance. Looking forward to having some time to talk about scriptless testing, how it's used, exactly what it means, and how it can be leveraged in your individual environments. So before I get started, just a little bit about who Turnkey Solutions is. You know, we're not necessarily a household name, but we actually have been around for quite some time. We were founded back in 1992, and we've been in the test automation market space since the early 90s as well. We were one of the first Mercury Interactive technology partners, and established that partnership in 1995, and we've been an HP OEM partner since 2012. So deep, deep roots in this industry. Our company is headquartered in Denver, and we do have offshore operations in Delhi, India, and from a customer perspective, all over the globe, every continent except for Antarctica, thankfully. But you know, our business really follows where enterprise applications and application quality are required, and of course that's in a global economy everywhere. It's important to note, and then we'll refer back to this frequently as I go through the presentation, but our test solutions are built exclusively on the HP ALM technology stack. In order to make the scriptless automation solutions work, it's required that you have Quality Center, that you have UFT and BPT from HP. So it's critical that we have that foundation, and we're going to talk about why that's important, how we use those technologies. They really build what we think is the industry's most effective solution. Scriptless testing, this kind of automation, one of the key benefits is that it enables use against hundreds of application types, you know, not just named applications, but, you know, underlying technology that can be supported using a common set of tools. So rather than having to have point solutions for different applications, this common set of tools can support virtually any application type. It also makes technology more accessible to business users, non-technical people, while still providing really powerful tools to QA experts that run TCOEs and are involved in defining test strategy. So I'd like to start with just a definition of what scriptless testing is. What do we mean by that? It's funny that you know, having been in this industry for a long time, it's second nature to me, but often there's confusion about exactly what it means. So I think I'm going to start with an industry definition rather than a turnkey definition. So this actually comes from Gartner. And I think if you look at other analysts, they all define it pretty much the same way. But they say scriptless testing tools reduce or eliminate the amount of scripting, of course, involved in the creation of tests and using a sort of variety of different types to get there, either model object, data or keyword-driven approaches, here the goal is to enable business user testing and reduce maintenance costs. So in our particular case, we are focused on functional automation. So this is sort of the industry standard definition. We change that slightly. Our focus is a little bit different. Our scriptless testing software solutions are designed to significantly reduce the time and the cost of application testing while eliminating the need for technical programming expertise. In other words, we want to abstract the ability to manage these kinds of functions up a level. Our solutions leverage an intelligent data-driven framework, so it's a keyword and data-driven framework. We've combined those two attributes. And it's designed to help streamline test creation and maintenance. And we're going to talk a lot about the maintenance issues and how we solve those. And the goal here is to substantially extend and deepen the test coverage you're able to achieve. And of course, that reduces any business risk associated with, poor application quality. With our solutions, there's no technical scripting or recording. Content's auto-generated and auto-maintained. And we're going to walk you through and show you exactly how we do this. And obviously, to create tests, then, you simply use drag-and-drop technology, which most business users are comfortable doing, and you're able to create these full end-to-end cross-platform automation scenarios. So that's our definition, and that's what we'll walk you through and show you today. So having said this is what scriptless testing is, we're going to talk about, why would one want to adopt it? What are the specific benefits?
Okay, Dan, we have a polling question here that's coming up. So this is for you, the audience. So what we're going to ask here is, what are the top challenges you face in application delivery and testing? So just go ahead, and we're going to take about a minute or less here to go ahead and answer this. So go ahead and start voting. All right, great. I'm starting to see some votes come in on this. I'm just going to give it a little bit. So Dan, as well, and we actually have a little bit of all of those. So I'm really interested in seeing what our existing people here that we have on this webinar actually have is what they see as their challenges. I do know that keeping test cases up to date and maintained is definitely, to us anyway, our largest. So we about have the votes coming in here. Okay, we'll go ahead and we'll calculate what we got. Let's see what we have here. All right, wow, so looks like from the results, we have about 38% of you have the same problems that we're facing, the challenges there. And then next to that is we have the shortening of test case cycles to speed up releases. So what do you think about that, Dan?
Well, I think that these are really, really common challenges. If we're, as experts in this field, we grapple with really some significant issues and a lot of business pressures, and it all comes down to the technology that is in our hands to go conquer those challenges. So not surprising at all. I'm going to start with, when we talk about the benefits, let's first talk about what the challenges are. What problems are we trying to solve? So if I walk through what I think are the sort of high-level standard issues that people face with the technology and sort of the environment we operate in. First of all, we're using record and playback technology primarily, which means you run through each possible process flow, or I like to call it business logic flow, and capture it so that you can develop a script and a test flow against that. I like to say that these are path locked primarily. You really have a test for each possible flow, and that leads directly to proliferation of the number of tests you have in a library, the number you have to build and maintain and use. And there's some challenges around that. So we think that there's some ways with technology that we can improve upon how that process works. I think that those issues or challenges lead directly to minimal test coverage. There's only so many test scenarios you can capture and build tests for and maintain. So often we try to do sort of happy path testing, or take the critical paths and then hope that the others work. And we just don't get the broader coverage that we might want. The classic problem, I believe, is maintenance. How do you find and update, maintain all these test cases you've developed so that they're useful and timely? And I can't tell you how many times that I've talked to customers where they have even tens of thousands of tests in the library, and they don't know which ones apply, which ones are current, and very frequently they simply build a new test when something comes up because they can't figure out whether or not they have a test or whether it's current, and it becomes easier to just build new ones. So, the maintenance issue is probably the biggest issue, I think, that is a ceiling for widespread adoption and coverage in the test area. And we're going to talk about some ways we can help solve that. Lastly, staffing. I mean, there's sort of two areas here that I think are important. One are, these are really deep technical skills, very specific. The other issue I find is that, particularly with complex applications, bridging the gap between the knowledge of the person who understands the application and trying to convey that to the tester who has to build a script and bridge that sort of gap between the technical skills and sort of the business knowledge can be a challenge. So these are some of the things that we hope to solve by use of technology. So I talked about the maintenance issue, and particularly in applications that are change-centric, that have change frequency. When you develop a script or recorded your script and developed a test automation case, each successive change cycle, the value of that original script deteriorates. And unless it's maintained completely all the way throughout this process, it'll deteriorate to the point where it really isn't of any use any longer. And either you go back to manual testing or you once again redevelop the script. And this is very, very common in my experience, that these things, these test assets deteriorate and become less than useful, particularly in change-centric applications. So there's always this trade-off. You have, I think everyone here who is a test professional has been in a situation where there are demands in terms of when you have to deliver. And I don't know if anyone here has ever been through this, where the development process takes a lot longer than expected, and what gets squeezed? The time allotted to test. We don't move the date out for delivery of an application, but testing gets squeezed. And of course, we don't have enough resources, and we don't have enough time, and then something has to give. And I call this sort of the business risk trade-off. How much risk are we willing to accept because we haven't really fully tested applications? And I think that we all have seen and heard stories that are legion of applications that have failed, where production applications have completely stopped, and particular enterprise applications, these are catastrophic and measured in millions of dollars per hour. So this trade-off is really important, and I don't think that I've met a test automation professional yet who felt that they had enough resources and time to really adequately do the job the way that they'd like to. So there's always this pressure and competing pressure. So we've developed a family of solutions that we call, that we say automate the automation. If you think about the automation tools we have today, we like to think that we can supercharge them and really provide an exceptional degree of capability beyond what you have today. I'm just going to talk about these. Our solutions are going to automatically create and maintain test automation content. And we're going to replace a script-based architecture with a component-based architecture. So you'll find that underlying this whole conversation is this change in architecture from script-based to component-based, and the things that this component-based architecture enables you to do quickly and easily and intelligently above and beyond what you can do today. At the same time, we implement a data-driven architecture, and this enables users to create test flows that cover many, if not hundreds and thousands of different business logic scenarios without having to have a separate test for each of those. So this gives you wide-ranging capability to exercise an application in many, many ways without having to add to this test library that you have to build and maintain. We're going to automatically identify changes in the application itself and then provide rapid and intelligent test case updates. We'll show you exactly how that technology works. And we're going to do this in a way that fully leverages your current investment in the HP test automation platform. We believe that it's the most powerful, comprehensive platform in the market today, and we want to help people take advantage of the investment they've made in the tools and in the training and in all the assets that they've built, so that none of that goes away. So these existing libraries can continue to be used. There's no requirement to replace those, and it does provide for a common set of tools to automate all your applications. So, high-level view of our product family. We're going to spend most of our time today talking about cFactory. cFactory is an automated, programming-free, kind of script-free BPT component generator. If you don't know what BPT is, it's the component architecture structure provided by HP. So it's an HP product. Our technology, cFactory, is going to work with any application or any technology type that's supported by QTP or UFT, because we use UFT for object identification. So in other words, if UFT recognizes an object, then we can build automation for it. I should add that we have a reasonably extensive library of add-ins on top of UFT native support that we use as well, so it provides added capabilities for technology support. So we've used cFactory then to develop component libraries or content libraries for a number of different widely used enterprise applications. So things like SAP, Oracle EBS, PeopleSoft, and most recently Guidewire, Temenos T24 banking application. So these are comprehensive libraries of pre-built components for all the standard functions that really speed implementation for these really complex applications. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. And finally, we have an impact-based testing set of tools called Turnkey Live Compare. This is specific for SAP. Again, leverages ALM. We're not going to spend a lot of time on that today, just in the interest of time, but if there's interest in impact or risk-based testing for SAP, certainly reach out to us. So if you look at this and you look at the combination of Turnkey's technology combined with HP's technology, we view this as really a single application. When you operate this, you really almost can't distinguish between the two technologies. Much of the work is done in quality centers, as a matter of fact. So we believe that this is the most comprehensive test management solution available in the marketplace today. And one of the things that we find that scriptless testing users are able to do is increasingly use our test automation structure to do agile testing. It's much more rapid development than script-based architecture, so it gives you added capabilities. We will talk a little bit about that at the very end. So I think we have another polling question.
Yes, we do, Dan. Okay, so we have another polling question. We're not going to kill you all with polling questions. We have one more after this one. So, but in this polling question, what we want to try to get an idea of is what percentage of your test execution is conducted manually. So just go ahead and take a minute here and click on to one of the choices. I know some of the stuff that we do a combination of. I'm pretty sure there's a lot of you out there that do a combination of as well, both manual and automated tests. That's always a challenge to try to see if we want something more for speed, we want something more for detailed quality. So just give it a little bit. We're seeing the votes start coming in. Just give it about 10 more seconds here. Okay, let's see what our results are. Right. It seems that we have about anywhere from 26 to 80% seems to be the more common answers there between those two. And then we do have a fair amount that are going between 81 and 100% of the test is manual. So there you go, Dan.
Very good, thank you. It's not surprising. We find that this ties directly back to what we learned in the last polling question, which is that given the allocation of resources, people, time, money, that you can effectively only build so much automation, and we think that sort of the average practical ceiling is about 20%. Before the effort required to maintain what you've built is consumed, and you don't really have the assets or resources to build anymore. That maintenance tends to eat up all of that resource. So we think that there's often a hard ceiling, well, maybe not hard ceiling, but a practical ceiling of somewhere between 20 and 30% of the top end of how much automation you can really achieve given the maintenance issue. So not surprising. I think we'll talk about how we can help tackle that problem. So I'm going to go through this sequentially. I'm going to start with, in this component-based architecture, how do we create content? We know how it's done in a script-based environment. How do you do it in a component-based environment? So what cFactory does, again, cFactory is kind of the heart of our solution. It's going to auto-create these test components. And for those of you who use BPT, you know, we find when we talk to companies that use BPT that it generally takes, depending upon the complexity of a given screen, somewhere between 2 and as much as 8 hours to develop a BPT component, or, you know, say maybe it's a really complex kind of SAP screen. We're going to create these components very quickly in a matter of seconds, generally about 10 seconds, to create a fully formed, fully optimized BPT component. The screen on the left here is just meant to denote that we support anything that HP supports and kind of beyond, so don't let the little monitor confuse you. But basically the way this works is cFactory sits on a machine along with UFT. We simply aim it at an application, any kind of an application, bring that application up with cFactory. You simply click on the screen. What cFactory does is it analyzes the screen. It's going to analyze every object, visible or not, all the properties of each of those objects, and it will automatically generate again, this fully optimized BPT component. And it does it, again, in seconds as opposed to hours. So, you know, this is really, really powerful in terms of how do you actually create the content, you know, for your applications. It's done very, very rapidly and in the standard way. So that's how cFactory operates, side by side with the application. Click on the screen, and you create these components. To build test cases, you know, those components are imported into Quality Center, and they're fairly simple to just like Visio, you drag and drop those into a test sequence and save it, and that becomes your test. And the test creation process is literally that simple. Those 2 steps: create the content and then string them together using drag and drop, save them into Quality Center, and you have a test. And you'll see, of course, that there's no coding required, there was no scripting required, non-technical business people or test quality experts can easily do this. So we've talked through how you create content and how you build test cases, and, you know, it's really quite simple. How do you then execute those, and how do you leverage this data-driven architecture? And this is an area where I think QA professionals can really make a big difference. We're going to take the skill set away from necessarily just simply writing scripts, but rather developing test automation strategies and then really leveraging this architecture for very, very broad coverage. So we just talked about, you know, in terms of manual coverage, we can flip that number completely around, and we find people that are able to achieve 80% plus automation coverage by taking their, you know, sort of QA expertise and using these tools effectively. So I'm going to go through an example of what a data-driven architecture is and what it does and why it's important. This happens to be a, if I'm not mistaken, I think this is a requisition process directly from Oracle EBS. So reasonably complex. You know, we have a series of screens. Each of these may or may not be used in a given business process. You know, you may have standard orders versus custom orders, domestic versus international, rush, etc. So, you know, this application could be exercised literally in thousands of different ways. What we do, rather than have a separate test for each of those scenarios, is we create a simple master test. In this case, I've called it the master requisition test. But you'll see that it contains a component. The little puzzle piece sort of denotes component. So this particular test has a component that correlates with each screen. It's fairly simple. So it contains a superset of everything that I might want to test. DataDriver is a proprietary technology. It's embedded within both cFactory and our accelerator solutions. So in this case, this would be the Oracle Accelerator coupled with cFactory. And what I do is I have a number of different test scenarios, and they're going to exercise the application in different ways. Remember, I still have just one test, the master requisition test. What happens is DataDriver launches each of these. So test scenario 1 is going to follow a specific path that's been identified, and the data itself that I've used in the test will determine the flow of the test at runtime. So the data is going to determine which of these components are used, what the flow is, and I determine the results that way. So with one test, I can literally write hundreds or thousands of test scenarios and use just the data to generate those tests and test results. So what does this mean? It means you can test much more of your application with much fewer. I think the typical compression is somewhere around 25-to-1, but we actually have people that have applications that have a lot of different variables where they actually can have written, over 1,000 test scenarios against a single test. So very, very powerful when you put this in the hands of a QA professional. At the same time, our DataDriver is going to automatically build a formatted Excel workbook that's going to correlate to that test you built. So if we go all the way back, we've built components. You'll see those here on the left in our test example. So we've generated the components. We've assembled them into a logical test sequence. When we save that and we run a utility that DataDriver has, it automatically generates this formatted workbook so that there's no work for you to do in terms of building the data repository to interact with the application. We've done a couple of things. You'll see here that each column here corresponds directly to one of those components. So all of the business logic data fields, if I were to click on that and expand it, would be included there. We do some color coding to show you which fields are required data, which are optional. So there's a lot of intelligence built into these worksheets. The other thing we do is that we give you a visual cue. So for users, we find that getting lost in the spreadsheet can happen, but if you just simply hover over that one spot, it brings up the actual screen from the application, so that ties back to the column on the worksheet, makes it really, really easy to navigate. And it's a little bit difficult to see, but if you look over on the very left-hand side of that worksheet where it says new scenario, this is where you would add in new test scenarios and add the data in across the application to build these new scenarios. Okay, so we talked about test component creation. We've talked about test case creation. We've talked about our data-driven architecture and how that might be used. Now let's tackle the big problem. Let's talk about test maintenance, which we've said is kind of the biggest issue that we all face as QA professionals. We provide an application-aware auto-update capability with cFactory, and this is really powerful. I think people get excited about that. So just to go back to our examples, we have our screens on the left, our application. This could be, in some cases, dozens or hundreds of screens. We've assembled a number of test cases, which you see in the middle, and each of these are comprised of components. So what happens when a screen changes? Let's say a field was added, a field was removed, maybe the order of operation changed, something has changed in this application. Well, naturally, that's going to break our component, and it's going to break every test case that uses that component, logically speaking. So what cFactory will do, cFactory is going to identify that change and give you the opportunity to update that component and then propagate it out to every test that uses it. Because the component-based architecture is a reference-based architecture, there's no need to go back into every test case. Each test case that uses a component is automatically updated. So this is how it actually works. You'll get a visual presented to you that shows the old component. This is the actual, keyword code structure of the component side by side with the new one. So cFactory's identified the screen that's changed. It's created a new component. It's going to give you the opportunity to see side by side and color code the changes. So as you can probably figure out, green means a field has been added, red means a field has been removed. Blue means that the order of operations changed. Orange, I think, means the data type has changed. This screen's a little bit busy. I tried to throw an example of each of the changes, so typically they're not this busy. But it gives you an opportunity to examine the changes, and you can either accept each of those changes one by one or accept all. And once that's done, then the component gets updated in the library, and again, every test that uses that gets updated as well. So it's that simple. It's that simple to update, to detect, update, and propagate out to every test a change. Now, the other thing that we do that's pretty cool is we're going to auto-maintain the data-driven architecture. We're going to automatically update the formatted Excel workbook that's associated with that test. So once you've accepted that, again, so say a field has been added, field's been removed, whatever it is that's changed, the workbook will have automatically been updated so that when your user goes in to run tests or to build new scenarios, it already reflects the new functionality in the as-built application. So all that's done automatically for you. We find that in the field, practically speaking, this reduces the maintenance effort by 80 to 90%. I mean, it's really, really significant. And so this is how we conquer that age-old problem of how do I even know what to update? How do I find them all? How do I update them all? And how do I push all those changes out? So time for, I think, our last polling question.
Yes, it is, Dan. Okay, so we got one more polling question here coming up. Now, while the polling question is getting queued here, do remember that we do have a questions panel, and by all means, we want your feedback from that. So go ahead and ask the questions away. Okay, so the question we have at this time is, what percentage of your testing time is allocated to test maintenance? So we're just going to give it a little bit of time here to see what we can get pulled in from everyone. I know that where I'm at, test maintenance is kind of like always big, because we're a regulated industry in the insurance market. So we have every single state that we do sell our product in. You know, right there, Dan, we have tons of maintenance because state requires certain changes. We want to roll out, you know, certain changes, and we have a fair amount of changes that are not only to our external customers, but also to our internal, you know, organizations as well. Okay, well, the votes are coming in here for this. All right, let's go ahead and wrap this up. Let's see what we got. There we go. All right, so it looks like, wow, some of you have a lot less problems than I do. All right, so we're looking at about 30% being the large one here, second to that being 50. So what do you think about that, Dan?
Well, I think that, well, I have to look at all the numbers. It's kind of hard to do that while I'm speaking, but I think that my experience is that maintaining that automation, and maybe this ties back to how much manual automation is being done. In our previous polling question, there wasn't as much automation going on, so therefore there isn't that much to maintain. But some of it ties back to the application types as well. If the applications don't change frequently, well then, you know, there probably isn't much maintenance. But you know, I think often these business critical applications haven't been automated for a number of reasons, not the least of which is kind of the size, scope, and complexity. And I think that leads us to our next area of discussion, which is how do you apply scriptless testing to enterprise applications, which often are done manually because of their unique requirements. So let's talk about what makes these applications a little bit different. And I'm speaking primarily to ERP applications, but in almost every industry there are significant applications that drive the business that are mission critical. You know, one is that we find that these are very, very, very change centric. If you're running SAP, you'll have transports at least weekly that, you know, are significant bundles of change, whether they be vendor-driven change or whether they be user-driven change. Similarly with Oracle, but, you know, most enterprise applications are that way. We find that, as an example, if you were using Oracle EBS, there's, you know, support packs and security patches, and when I ask people how current they are on those, I generally get a laugh because the full regression testing required to that application before you apply something is very, very significant, and it certainly can't be done on a weekly basis. So this is a really constant kind of a challenge. You know, these are metadata-based applications, and a single change in the application can affect almost any other part of the application, and it's impossible to know where and what. Even, again, a patch or a support pack from the vendor, they can't tell you exactly what the impact will be, largely because of customizations, which is our last point here. But once you've customized the application, it's impossible to know exactly what the impact of something like that will be without testing it out. And this is what makes our job so important in terms of quality assurance for applications. These applications are almost always mission critical. They run the business. You know, it could be HR, finance, supply chain, manufacturing, distribution. You know, the core functions of the business are generally wrapped up in these kinds of applications. And it means that you can't allow the production application to go down by implementing a change that hasn't been validated. And that process is really, really quite complex. There's, multiple modules, there's multiple scenarios, all that have to be validated before you can make a change. And as I mentioned, they're highly customized, and the other factor is they're heterogeneous. They're not just standalone applications. No one runs SAP just as SAP or Oracle. They have other application types that are integrated in, whether it be a mainframe inventory application, a web front end, etc. So to really validate a business process end to end, it's going to span multiple technologies. It's going to be cross-platform. And it could be a combination of package applications, could be legacy applications that have been developed, etc. So it makes it really, really complex. So these are the challenges that people are faced with when they want to do testing and validation of enterprise applications. And because of this, often we don't see a lot of automation done because they're just too complex. So what we've done is we've developed enterprise application support for a number of applications, and we have another 3 that are in development that we'll release in the next couple of months. And what are these? These are comprehensive libraries of pre-built DBT components. So we've used our technology to go build, validate the standard component structure for these applications. And it makes it much easier to implement and your time to value, and then to manage your customizations. So, that's the value of these. It really, we'll call it accelerator, really gets you to a state where you can test a broad range of scenarios and validate business processes very quickly. So, that's really what they're designed to do: dramatically simplify speed test creation, rapid implementation, rapid ROI. The C-Factory architecture we talked about, where you click on those screens, means that all your customizations are really easily integrated. C-Factory doesn't care if it's a custom screen in SAP or a standard screen. It operates the exact same way. So the other sort of age-old problem is, how do I deal with customizations? We render it very, very simple. It's no different than a standard operation. Again, we do this in a 100% HP ALM compatible environment. So you can leverage all the existing assets and get the biggest value from that HP investment. I should also add that we inherit all of the capabilities of ALM. You don't lose anything. We'll inherit as an example, the security provisions, all of the things that you use to manage users, etc., are all taken advantage of in our architecture. So just briefly, just to walk through how does this work. Again, here comes our friend C-Factory. We use C-Factory against these applications to build these massive component libraries. We string these together into pre-built test cases. The concept here is that while every company that I've seen uses these applications in a unique way, they're customized, it's easier to modify a standard process, say order to cash or hire to retire, to reflect the way that a company does business than to build it from scratch. And while that's not 100% true all the time, often it really helps in the implementation process. Now what we see is that, rather than if you were trying to do this with a script-based process and deal with the change and complexity and the maintenance required, where it really never ends. If you look at the top timeline, we just don't believe it ever ends. I mean, it's really, really challenging. The time to value for one of our accelerators, even in complex environment can be very short. I mean, 12 weeks isn't uncommon. So, you know, hence the term accelerator. We get you there against really, really challenging circumstances very quickly and effectively. So one of our newer capabilities is extending scriptless testing out to the mobile applications. So I didn't put a polling question in here, but I'm sure that many of you are either grappling with today or soon will be with how do you test mobile applications. And they have their own set of unique requirements. You know, they change more frequently. You have different platforms, iOS versus Android. There's portrait versus landscape mode, which is actually different code. There's pinch and zoom and all of these things that make it really difficult to test. And we believe that scriptless testing affords us just a tremendous opportunity to make this much easier. And really, you know, if you look at kind of how it works, we partner with mobile labs and with HP. This is again, an HP ALM-based solution. It works against all those applications I just talked about, and then again, anything that's supported by UFT or by the turnkey add-in library. So wide variety of application types are supported here. How does it work? Well, really no different than we said work with other applications earlier. You simply bring up that application, click on the screen, and cFactory is going to analyze the screen, and it's going to create these fully optimized BPT components so that we can string those together using drag and drop. But again, this has been extended out and now operates in a mobile environment. Again, quite simple to build those test scenarios. Same data sheets are generated. Data driver can be used to generate those different scenarios. So we've just extended that out. And you know, one of the other sort of unseen benefits is that often now mobile applications are used as the front end to these complex back-end applications. And you know, you can now test this as part of an end-to-end process where you go from mobile all the way to the back-end inventory applications and have that be a single complex end-to-end test. So having extended this out to mobile is really important in terms of how do you manage the entire business process. So I'm going to go through a short summarization back to a Gartner study. If you look at what the analysts are predicting in terms of the IT industry and the pace and rate of change in application, application extension into mobile and so forth, you know, there's a real proliferation of information, of course, that are going on that's driving virtually everything. And that change process is happening faster and faster. We see new and lighter IT organizations as delivery arms, you know, but the demand for change and demand for quality never goes away. What is changing is the timelines are shrinking. I think the market is demanding that change happens much faster than it did before. It gives us less time to respond to the business. We have to be much more agile. And therein lies the challenge, and we think that intelligent tools that help us do that are really the only way forward. For those of us that operate in an agile environment, I think that at least most people that I talk to would agree that scripting and script-based technologies are sort of anything but agile. It's very, very complex and difficult to use those kinds of technologies and meet the demands of agile sprints. And so using our technology to conquer that problem, to shift left, to be able to use testing earlier in the process and more frequently in the process because of its ease of development and ease of maintainability, leads very directly to shortened testing cycles. It reduces and, in fact, often can eliminate manual testing. You develop a very mature regression bed that can be used over and over again because we can maintain it. This leads, again, to higher levels of test coverage, and that all translates into ROI. So to summarize, it's all about faster, better, and cheaper, right? How do I do things faster without sacrificing quality, but actually extend quality, expand your test coverage? You know, we find that people are able to triple test coverage with a third of the resources, or take those same resources and be able to accomplish much more, broader and deeper test coverage, which we think is really, really important in today's environment. And you can do this at much lower cost. So, you can do a lot more with less. This is just a quick example. This is an actual side-by-side test that we did with a client when we did a rollout. And we took 2 application modules, and we said, okay, let's sort of do these side-by-side. We're going to build them from scratch, one using UFT, one using turnkey, all the way from prep creation through maintenance, and then total out the actual time effort involved. And you can see when you extrapolate that against the 2 full applications, the difference in terms of hours is about 94%. And a lot of that you'll see is in maintenance, where once you're built and operational, and you're in sustain mode, it really becomes different. And I think that putting these powerful tools in the hands of QA professionals enable us to be much more valuable to the corporations that we work for, deliver a lot more in terms of value to the company, and make our process ever more valuable. And with that, I think we're going to open it up to questions.
Okay, great, Dan. Yeah, we got a fair amount of questions here in, so by all means, do keep them coming in. And we may not get to them all right now, but we'll tackle as many of them as we can. It looks like, Dan, one of the largest questions that are coming in is, what is the licensing model for this product?
So our licensing model is fairly straightforward. It's a user-based license. So CFactory is a concurrent user license that enables, we use a concurrent model because we find that there are onshore and offshore teams that can consume these licenses at different times. And similarly, on our accelerator packages, there are concurrent user licenses as well as a license for the content library, that initial content library.
Okay, great. Another question here that we see come in is, are vendors use their own testing framework as opposed to record and playback? Is this typical, or does this approach typically reduce the maintenance issue of your QTP record and record and playback that you use inside of the QTP software?
Okay, you're going to have to repeat that one for me. I'm taking notes here. But.
Sure, sorry about that. Okay, is this, our vendors use their own testing framework as opposed to record and playback? Is this typical, or does this approach typically reduce the maintenance issue of your QTP record and playback use of QTP?
Okay, so this sounds like an external vendor that is providing services. This is fairly broad approach, or broad question. It covers a lot of ground. Let me see if I can condense this just a little bit. I think vendors like to use their own testing framework because they like to lock you into their services, and those are not reusable. They're not industry standard sort of assets that if you wanted to bring that effort in-house or you wanted to use a different vendor, it makes it very, very difficult. Our assets are all HP standard, and it's interesting, actually. we get this question from customers in the buying process often where they say, well, what happens if we want to get rid of you? And we say, well, you can. The assets you have built and developed are all HP standard, and you can continue to use them for forever. I mean, there's nothing turnkey about the BPT component. It's a standard HP construct. So, I don't think that anyone has, our maintenance capability has been patented. So I don't think anybody really has that, and I don't think it's really in a vendor's best interest. They like to spend a lot of time and hours doing maintenance because those are billable hours they get to bill back. That's part of their business. So I think that it isn't necessarily in a company's best interest to use a vendor's own framework frequently. Not always, but frequently. Okay, Bernard?
Okay,
question?
Great. Some of the other questions that we're starting to see coming in here, I know it's been somewhat partially answered, but let's see what your take is on it. So if you are not using an enterprise solution like, say, SAP, Oracle, but you have your own homegrown internal application. Is this solution still able to be leveraged and used?
Yeah, you know, the answer provisionally is yes. I mean, this is very, very common for us. In fact, many of our customers do not have these enterprise applications or ERP applications. So I'll give you an example. We have a banking client that has 600 applications, none of which are covered by our accelerator packages. The key here is, can we recognize the objects? So the easy answer is if UFT recognizes the objects in that application, then absolutely. If not, we often build application support using extensibility. So it isn't uncommon for us to look at an application and build some add-ins so that we can recognize objects and support an application. So the answer is yes, it just depends on the application, how much effort it takes to get there.
Okay, great. And speaking about add-ins inside of UFT or QTP, does one of the questions that we have here is, we use a third-party add-in for UFT to get it to recognize controls that UFT itself does not recognize on its own. So would this also be supported in by Turnkey?
You know, it's a great question, because we all face this challenge where we have applications and technologies where there may be certain controls that aren't supported, and again, our mantra here is if we can recognize the control, we can build automation for it. So if you have a third-party add-in that you use to recognize that, absolutely we can use that and use that to help build application support. So that's a great question, and we certainly can do that.
Okay, great. Another question is that we're starting to get a few of them about the Excel workbooks, the data sheets. So the question here is, are the tests and data sheets, the Excel workbooks, stored in HP ALM as well?
They absolutely are. You know, we want to leverage ALM to the greatest extent possible. You know, QC is a remarkable application type, and we use that as our framework for everything we do. So again, you're going to store these as projects inside of ALM. The data sheets are stored inside of ALM, so you have all the security provisions that govern that as well. So all of that, really, once you're finished, you know, building components or maintaining components, you're operating everything inside of ALM. So it really helps from a training perspective, because you're going to do the same things you do today.
Okay, great. Another question here we have is on the working.
All right, we're going to let Brad Calloway speak. Brad is the director of our global pre-sales organization, and he's probably best served to deal with this question very specifically. So, Brad?
I'm sorry, Bernard. Could you just repeat the question real quick?
Absolutely. This concerns Autoupdate. So is this done on command, such as by telling it to look for updates, or is it done on the fly if the test component is not working?
Yeah, so currently the way in which we handle it is to be, if we identify a component as not working, we'll use C-Factor to bring up that component and perform that maintenance update. One of the things that you'll see coming in the near future is kind of a learn capability as we execute tests. If a component fails, that auto maintenance will happen on the fly and then allow you to update that component after execution of that test. Certainly it's you know, on demand, and then future state will be, you know, as a test runs, if a component fails, we'll automatically perform that maintenance for you.
And that's actually in our next upcoming release, so fairly soon.
Okay, great. Another question here that
questions here that sorry, go ahead, Bernard.
Sure, we have a fair amount of other questions here. Do you have anything that you had coming that you want to speak to first?
Well, you know, there's just a couple, if you don't mind. Let me grab. One question here I saw was, do we have an accelerator for Oracle eBusiness Suite? Actually, that was our first accelerator. We released that many, many years ago. We probably have more customers on that suite than any other. So we have a very, very robust Oracle accelerator suite. Let's see. For SAP, it says, I see many change analyzers, BPCA, et cetera. How does our change analyzer compare to the aforementioned? Well, I think that ours is clearly the best. If you're familiar with BPCA, I think Business Process Change Analyzer is a complex piece of software. It requires T-bombs, et cetera. Ours is very, very simple to install. It performs deep analysis. And the other thing that it does that I think is really, really important is that it grabs those results and it brings those into ALM. It'll auto-generate requirements, but it also completely ties into our accelerator. So what we'll do is it'll identify every test then that has to be run. It'll prioritize those based upon business risk. And then finally, it also provides a gap analysis. So it'll tell you that things that are affected for which you don't have a test and give you the option to fill that in. So that's probably a much longer conversation, but suffice to say that it's very, very powerful, but it's also an integrated solution that ties ALM, the turnkey SAP accelerator in together and does really powerful risk-based testing. So Bernard, any others?
Sure, we got quite a few, which is great. So does cFactory Mobile run on mobile devices natively, or only in emulated environments? So basically, like, how are generated components exported, and which platforms are supported, such as like Android, iOS, and Windows?
Yeah, I'm going to let Brad take that one as well.
Yeah, so the way we test mobile applications is not through a simulator or emulator. It's actually natively. We have basically a cloud-based solution where basically go out to a website, you choose the specific device that you want to work on, and you're actually physically testing that device. As far as support, we support all the major mobile operating systems, and that goes from Android to iOS to Windows. But that is directly testing on the mobile device and is not an emulator.
Okay, great.
And
one of the
Bernard,
other,
there's a couple here that I might grab real quickly.
Sure,
one is
go ahead.
Related to our integration with Quality Center. When we built our product, we built it from day one, completely wrapped inside of ALM, QC. So it isn't just a light integration, but we're completely intertwined and baked in. So the term integration probably doesn't really do justice to how tightly connected we are with ALM. So as I mentioned at the outset, our products don't even work without that platform in place. So there's a real tight tie. There was another question about customizations. How do we handle customizations? And again, I think I may have touched upon this, but cFactory doesn't really care whether a screen is custom or standard. We use what we call templates to identify what type of technology that it's looking at. So as an example, cFactory has templates for a variety of web applications, Java applications, etc. There are unique templates that tell it that it's looking at SAP or Oracle EBS, etc. And so when you go to build content or manage content for an application, you simply select the appropriate template for cFactory to understand what it's looking at. And then that's how you deal with customizations or deal with specific applications. There was a question here about a demo, and I think what we intend to do is we're going to publish a time to conduct a web-based demo. So everyone will have an opportunity to then sign up for, and we'll go through the actual process and using the software and show you the live demo versus just a presentation. So Bernard, I'll let you choose any other questions.
Sure. I know that we're a little bit past the hour here, so we'll just do a few more. And one of the ones that I see here, is it possible to check entry and exit criteria before and after a test completes, such as like verify a table has a certain entry in it after the test, for example there?
Sure. I'm going to answer that question just a little more broadly, which is to say that any form of testing that you can do today with your script-based architecture with an ALM is supported by turnkey. So data validation, positive testing, negative testing, looping, sublooping, branching, and anything that you can do today, you can still do using turnkey. I like to say you retain 100% of all the capabilities you have today. We just give you added capabilities. And I think it's important to note that this is why it's, while we render this process less technical from a scripting perspective, QA professionals become even more important in this process. This just gives us QA professionals more tools to do more, to do deeper and be more intelligent, and make ourselves more valuable to our companies than simply our skills around scripting. So one of the other questions I have here is, what are the downsides of scriptless testing? Which is kind of a question I always love to see, and maybe we'll wrap up with this one. But the downsides are if you're a scripter and you don't want to take on these new challenges, adopt new technology, become skilled in the use of new technology, and become more valuable to your company, then I think that there's some downside, because I think the world is going to shift towards more intelligent automation. There's just no question. And I think the earlier you adopt the mentality that, hey, I want to be at the forefront of new technology. I want to learn and understand how I can take this technology and apply it to the business and help my company go from 20 to 80% automation, and not just broader but also deeper and faster and more agile. That makes us all more valuable, and I think that's important. So, but failure to extend your skills, I think there's probably some downside. The other is that there are companies that, I meet with people all the time where they have literally hundreds, in some cases, thousands of, manual testers, and I think the business model of providing sort of small armies of manual testers to try to conquer these problems is going to go by the wayside. Low-cost manual testing isn't automation, and the requirement as business changes and business accelerates, applications change faster, is for intelligent tools that help us support those kinds of environments. And I think the downside is for companies that are making a living off of manual testing, I think there's some significant downside there. Other than that, I think for all of us that want to adopt new technologies and become more valuable to our companies, the future's bright.
Okay, well that sounds great. Yes. Here we go. So I don't believe we have any more slides left, do we, Dan?
Nope, I think we're at a wrap. We have contact information, so if further questions come up, we can certainly get to those and answer those offline.
Excellent. Just a reminder to everybody that's on this webinar that this webinar is being recorded, and it's going to be posted on the Vivit website. And just give it a few days, and you'll start to see it there. Okay, well, thank you very much, guys. This was great.
Thank you, Bernard. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.